About 3 weeks ago, Logicked made a critique of my video where I said that subjective morality is impossible, and honestly it was pretty good. The arguments were quite rational, although I don't fully agree with them, but it made me realize something. I did a terrible job explaining my point those 8 months ago. And the main reason for that is I tried to fit in a very complex idea into a 5-minute video. So now I'm here to correct that. First of all, I still think that morality is objective, but I changed my view on what subjective morality is, because it's not as simple as I initially thought. So in this video I want to show you how subjective morality is actually an entirely different concept to objective morality, and clear up some of the misunderstandings that I said previously and elaborate on my point. To start with, listen to Logick's summary of my main argument.
Okay, my understanding of your point is something like this. Morality cannot be subjective because some, but not all, subjectively preferred highest goods can have moral systems built upon them which lead to self-defeating outcomes. And the systems with outcomes that are not self-defeating are the objectively correct systems. In other words, some moral systems have physical consequences, which objectively are consistent with the system's intent, and others have physical consequences which are not, which is true, but the only judgment of this state of things comes from the people who recognize it. Mindless physics are not judging you. They don't care if your system is self-defeating. That again is a subjective concern. I don't want to follow a system that's self-defeating, okay? That's your feeling as the subject. If you decide a moral system is worse on that basis, that's a subjective position. You're not getting from the objective, this system is self-defeating, to an objective, this system ought to be rejected. How do you propose to leap that chasm from the is to the ought? Maybe you have some argument for why you can, but you haven't stated it. You've just left it unstated as if it's obvious. But it's anything but obvious.
So first of all, actually this is the best Steelman attempt of my argument that I've heard so far. I agree with pretty much everything he said except for the last part. And there is a very good reason for that. I think the key misunderstanding can actually be found in Logick's own definition of morality. Please listen to this.
Morality is more of a social activity. It's a way of thinking and acting in relation to human action. It's humans reacting with condemnation or with approval to other humans' actions, or preemptively insisting that everyone should do this or nobody should do this. The world would be a better place if everyone was like this. The world being a better place meaning the world would be a place that I would prefer. And this preferred vision of the world that forms the basis for the moral response resides entirely within the subject who holds it.
So as you can see, according to Logicked, and as far as I can tell, most moral subjectivists, goodness is effectively preference, and preference effectively boils down to emotions, since they don't believe in free will either. So basically something good is something I personally approve of because I feel good about it, and something evil is something I don't personally approve of because I don't feel good about it. So initially this really confused me because I also believe that emotions exist and preference exists. I have my own preferences. Logicked has his own. Everybody has their own subjective preferences, and they are subjective, I agree with that. It's just that I don't slap the label good on top of that. And nor do any moral objectivists, as far as I can tell. So this is not even the same topic we are talking about. And to illustrate this point, let me show you this. I would like to explain my confusion in terms of the simple sentence structure in English, the subject, the verb, and the object. I prefer something like I prefer to help people. Now, subjective morality is more focused about the one who prefers and the act of preference, the subject and the verb. Whereas objective morality is more focused about that which is preferred. These are two different concepts. They're both real. All of that is real. There is the one who prefers, there is the act of preference, and there is also that which is preferred. It's just that we do not place the concept of good and evil in these two. That's it. I put decidedly here because I believe in free will. And because I believe in free will, I'm actually more subjective than you guys about this, because preference can be broken down into emotions, and emotions into biochemistry, which is objective. But free will is fundamentally subjective all the way down. So if you asked me whether somebody can objectively prefer or decide something, I would say no. This is entirely subjective, and I think it's more subjective than you do. But this does not conflict with that which is preferred or that which is decided. This is where we place good and evil. So this is technically a semantics problem. Take a look here. First of all, we both believe subjects exist. We can disagree about whether the soul exists or not, but we both agree that there is such a thing as a subject, like you or me. We also agree that different people have different moral systems. No difference there. And we also both believe that everybody has their own subjective preferences. It's just that we don't slap the label good and evil on top of that. So what is the main difference? Well, it seems like you guys just believe in less than we do. So what do we believe in that is relevant? Well, free will we do believe in, but it is actually not that relevant. The next one is crucial, the categorization of value-driven action according to the natural law. This is where we place our good and evil. It's a difference in definition. And finally, we believe that the natural law can be grounded in God, which is the ultimate source of good and evil. This is where the is and the ought meet. However, even if you do not believe in God, even if you do not believe in free will, you can still believe in the categorization, objective categorization of value-driven actions. There is nothing in the beliefs of materialism that actually object to this. Let me explain this a little bit further. What do I mean by value-driven actions? Well, you do believe in actions, like actions happen. This is an objective fact, right? And most of the time, these actions, if they are voluntary, they happen because of something we value. We value something and that value manifests as an action. That's what I mean by value-driven actions. And the important part here is according to the natural law. This is how we categorize it. So just to be clear, I don't think there can be any disagreement between us in terms of whether actions exist or not. Like, we both believe actions exist. We both believe people have values, objectively speaking. The only question is whether they can be objectively categorized. And I think they can be. So first of all, just to give you an intuitive idea of what I'm talking about, think about these three things. You have helping your mother, giving money to the poor, and then murder. Pick the odd one out. I think most people will know which one is the odd one out, and this is not because of any preference. Like, you can prefer anything you want, you can prefer any combination of these three items, but there is something about murder that is objectively different from helping your mother and from giving money to charity or something like that. Like, these two things have something in common. They're both giving, whereas murder is taking. Similarly, we can look at something like theft. We have, for example, piracy, we have shoplifting, and we have bank robberies. Now, they're technically three different things, but you can see that there is a similarity between them, and this similarity is objective. For example, if I placed murder next to them, everybody would rightly notice that murder is somewhat similar and yet somewhat different from the other three. So we can see similarities. We are intelligent creatures, we are able to abstract, and abstraction is useful. Like, I don't only want to know what you subjectively prefer. I want to also be able to know what that thing is, without having to specify every single instance or action. For example, if I hear in the news that somebody says somebody's a good guy, I want to know exactly what that means, and if all it means is good by his own subjective preference, by his own subjective standard, then there is no shared meaning. Like, the power of words comes from the fact that we can share the same symbol and in the same context know the same meaning. And if I don't know what somebody means by good, then that word becomes entirely useless. So I don't only want to know what somebody prefers, but what that thing that he prefers is, and what category that belongs to. Like, that is the aim of objective morality, and it's useful. Sure, there is some subjectivity in categorization, because there is more than one way to objectively categorize something, and scientists had a bit of a struggle trying to identify exactly what a platypus is, because on the one hand it has fur and it feeds with milk, but it also lays eggs like a snake and has a venomous spur on his foot. It's a really strange creature, and has a beak as well. and webbed feet. So yes, there's going to be some gray areas and some things that are difficult to categorize, but that doesn't mean that we can't do this. Like, I think it would be quite ridiculous to say that we can't categorize animals because there are some inconsistencies or because there are some gray areas. Like, okay, yes, there are, and some things are difficult, and sometimes we have to refine things, and that's good. It means we're making progress in trying to explain reality. But reality it is. It's not something subjective that we personally prefer. Like, for example, life itself is quite difficult to define, but you would not say that life is not objectively real. It's just difficult to define it. And this is why I think it is actually quite absurd not to believe that objective morality exists. It does, and we can do this. It may be difficult, but we can do this. And let me show you how we can do this. First of all, let's clear up a misunderstanding, which has to do with the values. So this is what happened in the previous video. Let's say that my highest good is eating cakes.
I knew it. I'm with you, buddy. In my moral system, going to the gym is evil, unacceptable. Exile for those people, bare minimum.
So I will sacrifice everything for that one goal.
To eat cake? Okay, I'll sacrifice like $7.
That's quite funny.
Sorry, I'm just not on your level.
By everything, I mean everything. That's what it means to have a highest good.
Okay, so your moral system has to be built on something that you would sacrifice absolutely everything for. So if I, for example, feel a bit of anger when I see my neighbor's house get broken into, that has to be fundamentally based on some singular highest good that I've clearly identified, for which I would give up literally everything. That doesn't sound true. I think I can just be mad. Why do I have to approach it in this weird way? Is this also some objective fact about reality that I'm not aware of?
Well, not exactly. Okay, so let me clarify that. So here is an example of a value hierarchy. At the top, you have like health, family, and adrenaline. Here are 3 things that you like. So no, it doesn't have to be a singular goal. You can be incoherent. Most people don't have a singular goal. You value family, and because you value family, you want to have a wife and children. And your wife and children want to go on holidays, which is why you value holidays. You normally wouldn't, but because they value it, now you value it as well. And because you value holidays, you value money, and because you value money, then you value work. This is a simple value hierarchy, and maybe this is more intuitive than eating cake. And on top of that, you can have other values, like you also value your own health. And there is no contradiction between these two. You can accidentally have 2 highest values that do not contradict each other. You can also have highest values that do contradict each other. For example, adrenaline and family. Like if you want to do extreme sports and gambling, and you gamble away your house or your car, and you do that for adrenaline, and you value adrenaline just as much as you value family, and things like this do happen, then you know it can become a problem. Like one gets in the way of the other. So you can have an incoherence within any moral system, any value hierarchy, or a coherence. Now, if a system has only one highest value, then obviously it is fully coherent. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is good, but at least it's coherent. Now, the main point I was trying to drive at with the highest values, whatever it is that you have, you're doing things because of something else. And whatever that something else is, you're doing it because of something else. Again, it's value stacked on top of a value and stacked on top of a value. Wherever that chain ends, that is your highest value or values. Okay, fine, it doesn't have to be one, it can be many, whatever. Theoretically, if you knew anybody's highest set of values, or value if it's a single one, and you knew the context where they were, their upbringing and everything else, then you could deduce exactly what they would do. Why is this important? Why can't we just look at any one of these things? Well, take a look here. Now, what if somebody valued himself more than his health or his family? So he has a family, but he has a family not because he values the family by itself, but because it makes him look more prestigious. And he values health because he loves himself. So imagine what would happen if his family became very sick, like his wife got dementia or something like this, then he would most likely actually leave her and find a different family. So the highest value completely changes the context of all the other actions that follow. This is why it's not reasonable to just look at the action of killing by itself, because killing is typically done for a reason, a higher reason. Like, did you kill somebody to defend your family, or did you kill somebody because you wanted revenge? That actually changes things. That's why when I talked about self-promoting and self-defeating moral systems, it's primarily about the highest value. So how can we categorize value-driven actions? Well, first of all, I have 3 observations that I think are key to this. As I mentioned last time, self-promoting and defeating moral systems, then incomplete moral systems, and finally the convergence of actions due to time. They are actually all linked in a certain sense. I'll show you how at the end. But first of all, let's take a closer look at the first one again. I actually decided to formalize this. Premise 1, every moral system manifests good actions. And what I mean by this is exactly what I tried to explain here, where you have some values on top of values on top of values, and they only manifest as the actions at the very end. Yes, so those values need to be taken into account, and the actions can't be looked at independently of those values. Next, premise 2, all actions have consequences. Pretty simple. And premise 3, all moral system consequences either promote or impede future good actions. What this means is, whatever moral system you have, that moral system will manifest as some action towards the good. That action will have some consequences, and those consequences will help you to perform this good action again, or it will get in the way of performing this good action again. And therefore, the conclusion is all moral systems are self-promoting or self-defeating. Now, it's very interesting that Logicked actually agreed with my conclusion, but disagreed with what this means for morality. First of all, Logicked, I don't think you fully understood what I mean, and this is evident in the examples, but to be fair, I didn't explain it very well, so that's more likely my fault than yours. But let's take a look at what you said.
So your definition of evil then, moral evil, is just anything you do that results even inadvertently in your own destruction.
Nope, not inadvertently. They have to be connected with the values of the moral system. If something is done or happens inadvertently, then that's not part of the system. It's just an external event. It's neither good nor evil, or it can be, but it's nothing that you do that's good or evil. It can be a good or evil of somebody else, for example, or nobody, if it's an accident. So that's my first point. Let's keep watching.
So, for example, if you like to go rock climbing and then you fall and you die, it was morally evil to go rock climbing? And that...
No, it wasn't. Well, or maybe it was. It depends. Like, this is the point I was trying to get at. It depends. Why are you rock climbing? Are you rock climbing because you're trying to run away from a predator and then you fall and you die? Well, you're trying to save your life. Then it is life that you are valuing. It was not rock climbing. Rock climbing was the action performed. It depends what the value is. Now, if you did happen to value rock climbing, and that was your highest value, and you valued rock climbing more than you valued your family, now, yeah, that would be a problem.
And that was reality itself morally condemning you for your evil actions? A kid runs into the street after a ball and gets hit by a drunk driver, and so that kid was objectively evil scum?
No, but that sounded funny. No, this is not about the kid, and this is not first. So first of all, we are, again, and this is actually even quite common in Christianity, we are not judging the people, we are judging the actions themselves. Like the judgment is not on the person. At least in our religion, only God can judge people. What we should only be judging is the behaviors themselves, not people. It's a common saying, judge the sin, not the sinner. That's the first thing. Second of all, the drunk driver is not part of the moral system, so no, it's not self-defeating or self-promoting, it's an external event. It's something external to the system itself. Now, this could potentially be evil if, for example, he was arrogant and he was old enough to know that he shouldn't go onto the street when the ball is there, or he should look left and right, and he decided not to do that anyway, because why would he get hit? So, yeah, it could potentially be evil that way, I suppose. It could also potentially be evil because his parents didn't take care of him, although the blame would then not go on him, but on his parents. Like, we can all agree that children being hit by drunk drivers is not a good thing. And obviously the drunk driver is at fault here. But this has nothing to do with the system being self-promoting or self-defeating. This is definitely not self-defeating.
Like, you're defining things as moral or immoral based solely on whether they cause you personal harm or not. These kind of absurdities are the obvious outcome of that kind of thinking. And then, of course, this applies to all sorts of things that most people would consider very, very good, like heroism, say, or charity, where if you do them too much, you take too many risks, you try too hard to help other people, you can end up injured or impoverished or dead. Are these evil actions?
Nope. They are not. And they're not self-defeating, because the focus, when I say self-defeating, I don't mean that the self as in you are defeated. Self-defeating means that the moral system itself is defeated. So when somebody goes and tries to help somebody, and because of that, they themselves suffer, and there is a very good chance, if carried out successfully, and that's another part that you have to take into account, like failed actions shouldn't be the judge of moral systems. So if you try to save somebody and you weren't successful, then that's not self-defeating, because that's not part of the intent. You didn't intend to fail. This is the first thing. Secondly, even if you knew that you were going to die, but you, for example, saved 3 people and you valued life, then congratulations, you succeeded. Now there is 3 life instead of 1. So So a lot of the time, if the action is successful, typically a self-sacrifice is going to bring in more benefits than harm overall. And that's because it's not just about you, it's about the system itself. And the people that carry on can then move on and keep doing that.
Fireman decides the highest good is rescuing people from buildings, dies in fire saving child. What a bastard. If he...
Oh man, that is funny. Yeah. No, that's not self-defeating either. So first of all, it is not as if self-sacrifice is the main goal here. Like, sacrifice is a function of a value hierarchy. You sacrifice something lesser for something greater. But what matters is what you sacrifice something for. So if you decided to sacrifice your life for, I don't know, a bottle of vodka or a Snickers bar, people would think you're stupid, right? This is clearly not a good sacrifice. But if you were a fireman and you decided to sacrifice yourself for somebody else's life, it is not the sacrifice you're valuing, it is the life that you're valuing. And life is self-promoting, and sacrificing yourself for somebody else is good.
If he wasn't, then reality wouldn't have done that to him. Do you see why it makes very little sense to try to say that physical consequences are reality's backlash to your objective moral failings? These are not the same thing. They're not even connected. One doesn't imply the other in any way. At least not necessarily. It's a big...
Actually, they do. I mean, not necessarily, that's correct. But typically, good values result in good consequences. It's not always the case, because sometimes you can have good consequences from evil actions, although that's typically, again, I would say only temporary. In the long term, you can only have good consequences from good values, because most systems that have good consequences in the moment are actually self-defeating. So this is why I would really wanted to go over and explain this value hierarchy and how the values have to be connected to the moral system, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. There, so I explained most of them, like rock climbing, a kid runs after a ball, heroism, self-sacrifice, yes. All of these can be accounted for if you look at the proper context. And the proper context is the value hierarchy, and what the values are, and what is the highest value, not just the actual action itself. Yes, it doesn't make sense if you just look at the action itself, but it does make sense if you look at it through the lens of the entirety of the value hierarchy, especially the top value. Now, one thing I haven't yet explained is the war. Who wins that conflict?
I don't know. Who's fighting?
Every single philosophy or every single moral system that you come up with will either help you to build a nation that will win a war, or it will prevent you from building a good nation that will win a war?
A good nation that will win a war. So the definition of a good nation, meaning morally good, is a nation that's more capable of winning a war. So this is just full-on might makes right at this point.
No, it's not, but I understand where the confusion came from because I did not explain myself very well. Again, going back to the value hierarchy, the war is the final action. What matters is everything that came before that. And more specifically, there are many values, which are good values, that are necessary for any war campaign to even begin. Like, first of all, you need people. And to need people, you need to value life. There needs to be some good procreation and good family values. Otherwise, you're not going to have very many people. The technology is obviously going to help you in a war, and for that you need to care about the truth. And there are many other values that come before having a war and winning in a war. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be the perpetrator. You could be defending yourself. So I was thinking not just about the action of war itself, but about everything that came before that. Anyway, yes, it is possible for an evil nation to win in a conflict like we've seen with Nazi Germany, for example. But again, that is short-lived. Even if such a nation succeeds, if it doesn't have good values, it's just not going to last very long. And this is something we see over and over again. So yes, you can have temporary success. My point is still about time, about something lasting for a long time. And in order to be successful, not just in the short term, but in the long term, you must have a self-promoting moral system. If you don't, you're going to fail sooner or later. Now, the main point I was trying to get at here is like, yes, obviously we can have intelligent discussions about morality, even with moral subjectivists. I'm not saying we can't. What I was trying to get at is that if there are two people with completely opposite moral systems, and irreconcilably so not just, a little inconvenience, but something that people can't stand, then it is not possible for these two parties to intelligently converse about who is right and who is wrong, because they just differ in their opinions. So the only thing you can do is fight. And no, I don't mean fight literally necessarily. Yes, it could happen. No, I wasn't being literal about that. Yes, you can vote. There are many other systems, but if the conflict is too big, then yeah, it is going to lead to a war, because there is no other way. Now, on the other hand, in objective morality, it is possible to speak with each other about this and determine what is good and what is not. But unfortunately, yeah, it still leaves the problem that somebody can just say, okay, yeah, this is evil, I still want to do it anyway. And then yeah, there is no arguing with that person anyway. So I suppose that wasn't the best example I was trying to give. But anyway, these are the thoughts that were going through my head.
Sure, it's self-defeating, assuming you approach it in a thoughtlessly brute force way, where you don't consider where the actual sweet spot is, no pun intended. But I guess you could avoid that by, instead of making your highest good eating cake, just making your highest good that you eat so much cake that you get hyperdiabetes and die. That you can do really easily. That's not self-defeating. Pretty much got a straight shot over to that goal, as long as you don't die of a heart attack first.
Okay, so if you bake in self-defeatedness into the system's intent, then it is not self-defeating. I don't know if that helps a lot, but okay, technically you are correct. If you decide to be self-defeating, then you can be true to your intent without necessarily being self-defeating, although you still are self-defeating in a sense, because that is your goal. But anyway, the main problem here is, I think, the incompleteness of the moral system, which is my next point. So some moral systems are just incomplete, and I'll show you how. A complete moral system must represent reality, and reality includes time. And if your moral system just suddenly stops, then it's ignoring all the future after that, so it's not complete. This is one way of a system not being complete. You can also be egoistical and only think about yourself while ignoring everybody else. That's also incomplete. Now, there's many different ways, like you can ignore space, time, people, different values, actions, consequences, context. There's many different ways for a moral system to be incomplete. And how does it play out? Well, it's actually pretty simple. Like, the most intuitive example I can give you is if somebody thinks that they're the center of the world and they are the only ones that are important, and they ignore pretty much everybody else, they're going to very quickly find out that they are in fact not the center of the world. They are going to offend someone sooner or later, and is going to have some consequences. Just think about it this way. Yes, there is an is and an ought, but the is already baked into the moral system. What I mean by this is you can't make any coherent or any moral statement whatsoever without any kind of an is. Like, moral systems have to work in reality, not in fantasy. In the complete absence of any objective information, you couldn't even formulate words. You wouldn't know left from right. You couldn't say that murder is wrong because you wouldn't know what murder or a person is. Like, you need to have a basic fundamental concept of reality to even speak. And after that, like, the more the better. The more accurate your representation of reality, the better you can have a moral system to function within it. If there is a mismatch between your concept of reality and actual reality, and if you build your system on an incomplete framework of reality, then it's going to fail sooner or later. It has to, because it's not complete. Like, another great example for this, and we see this all the time in movies, is the concept of revenge. For example, a revenge plot. When somebody is hurt by someone and they decide to take revenge no matter what, and then sometimes they go and they succeed. And then what? And then they feel empty, and they have no idea what to do with their life, because their entire moral system or their entire goal evolved around getting that one person, and they consider that to be good. And now that they are finished with this, time is still going. Time hasn't stopped. It's time is gonna go on, and even after you die, time is still gonna go on, and then you have children maybe, or there's going to be other people in society. Like, you can't just ignore a part of reality, because then your system isn't complete. So yes, you can have eating cakes until you die of diabetes as your highest good, but that doesn't take account of anything that happens after that. So it is an incomplete system by definition. So if I was to refine what I said before, I would say that complete moral systems are only self-promoting or self-defeating. Yes, incomplete moral systems you can have a seemingly evil outcome that is not self-defeating, but it is incomplete. Now, just to backtrack a little bit, listen closely to what Logicked said again.
So you're saying it's self-defeating. Sure, it's self-defeating, assuming you approach it in a thoughtlessly brute force way where you don't consider where the actual sweet spot is, no pun intended.
Yeah, so what happens when you do actually consider where the sweet spot is? Well, something interesting happens actually. Convergence of actions due to time. What do I mean by this? Someone must be present to carry out actions. And what that means is that survival becomes universally essential. And so do social values. Effectively, if you do decide to be reasonable and space things out over time, as I have said, not only are all the actions going to be either self-promoting or self-defeating, you're going to see a convergence of actions. Whether you want to play guitar over time, whether you want to, become the best rock climber, or whether your family is the most important, or is it money, or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Survival is always going to be there. Like, there is going to be a convergence of actions that will follow from that. And because we are social creatures by nature, social values will come along with that. So if you're going to try to be reasonable about anything and space things out over time, that's going to include not just survival, but along with survival, social values such as honesty and courage and many others. And all of that is going to be necessary no matter what your goal is. I think this makes sense, and this is how societies evolve. Now, even if you look at businesses, they are a little bit different than they used to be. They suddenly started caring about how the employees feel and if they get enough breaks and other things that normally would be considered good. Why? Because they're more profitable at the same time. There is a convergence of actions due to time, at least until survival. Now, what happens after survival? After you have everything you need and you have an overabundance of resources, for example. Now, this is where some strange behaviors start to pop up, as we've seen in the last couple of decades. And that's because once you have enough money and you have more than you need, then it suddenly becomes possible to sustain self-defeating behaviors in a small way. So some values and behaviors are suddenly self-defeating in a sense, but you're now capable of sustaining that because you have an abundance of resources. However, that still doesn't change the fact of what these behaviors are. So yeah, if you're very rich and you have lots of money, you could spend some of that on drugs and alcohol and get completely wasted and high and then go to the hospital to heal yourself up and, like exchange your organs or whatever after some time. That is possible, but that is still following the same pattern. So yeah, technically this is kind of a sustainable way of being in a sense. However, nevertheless, these actions, if we are to categorize them, they would still fall under the self-defeating category. You're now just rich enough that you can sustain yourself. So if you take all self-sustaining moral systems over time, some will be better than others, some will thrive more than others. It just follows the same pattern, but into the positive. It doesn't have to stop at zero, at survival. And now finally, this brings us to the life process. And this is why I said, all the way back here, that the categorizations according to the natural law. I'll explain a little bit more about what at least some of that means in my estimation. This is what objective morality is basically about. It's about the life process. It's about the natural law. If you don't think that life is good, or if you ask me, like, okay, but why does life have to be objectively good? At this point, I have no idea what you're talking about, because, okay, are you asking me why is it subjectively preferable? Well, if that is your question, then I will grant you that preference is subjective, but this has nothing to do with that. It's about the categorization of objective actions, and this is effectively how we categorize it. It makes most sense to categorize morality around life because this is what we fundamentally are. We are living beings, and because of this, our actions can follow life or it can go against life. And all the observations I've made so far, they are tied up in the life process. This is effectively what life is. So the first important thing to notice is that life is not just a thing, it's a process. It's ongoing. Every single bone in your body is going to be replaced every 10 years. We are a dissipative structure. We continuously change and move. We are not just a thing like a single frame from a movie. We are a ongoing process, and that's also why time is important. This process can be abstracted, it's fractal. Like, how you can have computers and you can make computers from different things. You can have the same function, but you can replace what you make that function with. You can replace it with silicon, you can replace it with a rock, or if you've seen the movie, I haven't, but I've seen the scene, the free body problem. You had people which basically acted like a processor, just waving flags up and down. So processes can embody different levels of reality, and the same is true of the life process. And actually Richard Dawkins was one of the first people to notice that, which is quite interesting, because what he said is, are there any other self-replicators? And a self-replicator is effectively what life is. And there are, and what he found out is that ideas are self-replicating. I can have an idea and the idea can spread, or the idea can die. And then in his conversation with John Peterson, when they talked about it, it turned out that, yes, ideas can undergo an evolutionary process. And morality is a part of the idea level, not the biology level. But it is an extrapolation. It's another level of another fractal level of the same process, of the life process. The life process is a positive feedback loop. This is what life does. It survives and thrives, it replicates, it grows, and it's self-promoting. This is what I meant before when I talked about self-promoting and self-defeating moral systems. Self-promoting moral systems are living moral systems. They converge on survival and thriving. And we have convergent evolution as well, which is an interesting concept, which goes back to the survive and thrive, because some species just show up over and over again. And well, it's not the same species, it's actually a different species, but the same kind of structure of the species, like a turtle structure or a dragonfly or something like that. They just pop up again and again at different times, coming from completely different family lines. And the reason why that happens is because some strategies are just more successful than others, and they are successful across time. And this is exactly what also happens with morality. Some moral systems will persist and others will perish. And even if some moral systems perish, some good ones, for whatever reason, they will pop up again. Because this is how convergent evolution works. And it doesn't only apply to biology, it also applies to ideas. And it doesn't only apply to ideas, like this fractal nature also applies to technology. I mean, if you just think about what technology is, really, it is an outsourcing of the life process. The clearest example we have now is AI. AI is effectively an outsourcing of our brain. Machines are an outsourcing of our arms. And cars are an outsourcing of our legs. Like, we have all these different systems that we create that are effectively kind of like an interface, if you really think about it. Like, what does a biological organism do? It adapts to its environment. Well, we as humans have advanced to the point where we started to create our own environment, and instead of adapting to the chaos outside, we adapt the technology, which serves as an interface between us and the chaos outside. And it is our technology which is advancing while we kind of stay the same for the most part, although we are still changing in a sense, because our environment that we're creating is changing. But anyway, the environment we create, the technology we create, is an outsourcing of the life process. You can't escape the life process. Whatever you do or whatever you make is either going to go according to the life process, like it's going to be attuned to it, or it's not. And if it's not, then it's going to die. Like, anything outside of the life process is not going to survive, whether that's technology, whether that's ideas, whatever that is. So yeah, this is effectively why I initially said that, morality is concerned with the natural law. And the natural law is what determines what we do, because this is what we are. We are living beings. We are a living organism. We live on a living planet. This is what we are. And living organisms are a process, and they do something. They have an aim. Like, we are not aimless. We do have an aim. And you can go against that aim. You can decide to do something different. But you then have to say that this is what you're doing. So if you decide to go against the life process and you decide to go on a killing spree, then you're doing something evil, and you just have to admit that, because we need language that is common to everyone so that we can know what kind of actions like we are performing. And like this makes most sense. Like, if you really think about it. Now, if you really think about it, like, most parents, they want the children to survive and thrive. It's like, is that a surprise? It shouldn't be. And if they don't, if they do something self-destructive, then they will tell them, you're doing a bad thing. And this happened over and over again throughout history. And any parents that didn't say that, well, their children didn't end up very well. Let's just put it that way. Or maybe they did. Maybe, they changed their mind. But anyway, that definitely did not have a good effect. So this is why I can't get around to the idea of subjective morality, because it seems to me to be simply incomplete. Like, why do you guys stop at just the preference? Like, okay, yes, knowing what people prefer is important, and different people will prefer different things, and they will decide on different actions regardless of what subjective or objective morality is, and we have to deal with that. Like, all of that, that deals with actually important real world problems. I don't deny that. But why stop there? I mean, clearly there is an objective way to categorize different actions and values, and it has to do with life, and it makes sense that it has to do with life. And the word good itself, it has to evolve somehow. It's not a new word, and the words good and evil, they seem to pop up in every single culture across the planet, regardless of how remotely separated they are. Now, why do you think that is? Is it just to do with preference? Well, no. Yes, different people will have different moral systems. Like different cultures, they will have different concepts of good and evil. But just for your information, it is not us that change the definition of good and evil to something else. It's not like we've come up with a completely new concept. I'm not talking about something brand new. This is old. It's much older than subjective morality. Like, okay, yeah, there were some philosophers who had some ideas, like Greek philosophers who had some ideas that seemed like subjective morality in the past, but this was by no means the popular view. And it's not the popular view now either. So if you think that subjective morality is the dominant view, well then think again, because the vast majority of people in the world are Christian, and straight after that Muslim. And we may not agree on what is good and evil, but we both do agree that morality is objective, and we have for a very long time. Now, I haven't studied the history of philosophy all that much, but from what I gather, the concept of subjective morality really started to pick up quite recently in the last 2 centuries. It's a new concept, and it's not the most popular concept. So I would really recommend for any moral subjectivist to reconsider, because objective morality is a real thing, it's a real phenomena, and it's, I hope we don't have to play a language game and just semantics with definitions. I've outlined what I think good and evil are from an objective point of view, and not from a theological point of view, but even from a materialistic point of view. So you don't need to believe in God, you don't need to believe in free will, you don't need to believe in anything supernatural for this. It's still going to be useful, like really, really useful to know this stuff. Now, some of you may say, well, this has nothing to do with like Christianity or religion whatsoever, so my concept of morality is completely alien to any other moral system in the world. Well, this is completely untrue. And if you just look at what it says in the Bible at the very beginning, you will quickly find that God creates life and calls it good straight away. Then he creates humans, calls them very good, and then he tells us to be fruitful and multiply. Like, this is the very first, you could say, commandment that God gave to humanity. And then, fast forward to Jesus' time, the number of life referencing parables is astounding. Like, Jesus said that the kingdom of heaven is like a small mustard seed that grows into a big tree. And then he talked about the parable of the sower, how he's sowing, and some of the seeds fall onto bad soil, and then they die, and some of them fall into good soil and they survive and they thrive. So, the parable of the talents says how people who will make a good use of what they have will get more, and people who won't, then they will lose what they have. Again, it shows a very clear distinction between some systems being self-promoting and self-defeating. And then, we may wonder, well, what about the things I said about values, like the value-driven actions? Well, Jesus was very strict about talking about how values are important. Like, Christianity is primarily virtue ethics. Like, if you just consider the example of the widow giving charity, she was very poor, but Jesus said that she gave more than anybody else, not because of the consequences of how much she gave, but because of the intention, because she gave everything that she had. And then, well, what about the consequences? Does Christianity ignore consequences? Well, no. Also no. Jesus said, again, that you will know them by their fruits. And this is true. Like, if successfully carried out, good values will manifest as good consequences. Now, this won't always happen because it's not always successful, and also sometimes it just so happens that we have some parasites which have temporarily, or just like stealing from other people, and they seem to be wealthy themselves, but this is just temporary. It is not sustainable over time. So what I'm saying is very much in line with Christian ethics and Christian morality. This is not foreign to Christian morality whatsoever. Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." This concept of life is popping up over and over again. So if you really wanted to go into theology, I could explain, like, yeah, God is the fundamental creator. Like, this is what he does. God creates. And creation is effectively what life is. Like, life is creative. It's self-promoting. And this is, God created us in his image, and life creates itself in its own image. For example, if you have children, then that child will be in your image, just like we are in God's image. I can go on into the theology if you would like. I don't think you would find it very interesting, because obviously you're not a Christian, and most of you are not Christians. And I'm mostly addressing this to the atheists and agnostics right now. But anyway, if you are wondering whether this aligns with Christianity, yes, it does. Like, Christianity is life-centered, and this is also why it's so successful. And this brings me back to the point, like, when you said that sacrifice is self-defeating, and one of the first things that actually came to my mind, I forgot to mention it. No, sacrifice is definitely not self-defeating, and the best example of that is Jesus. I mean, this is what he did. He sacrificed himself for the world. And what did that turn out to be? I mean, he was just, and it's exactly as he said, small mustard seed to a giant tree. He was just one single carpenter in the Middle East. That's it. He was a carpenter in the Middle East, a single man. And now this is the biggest religion in the world. You can't say that Christianity is not self-promoting. You can't say that Christianity is not thriving. It is the most thriving system in the world. And now you know why, because it's focusing on that. It's focused on life and on surviving and thriving. So it shouldn't come as any surprise that it took over the Roman Empire and then spread throughout the world and continues to spread. Like, you may think locally that Christianity is declining, but no, it's not. It's actually still growing, and it's going to continue to grow. It's not going to stop growing. So, to briefly summarize, subjective morality defines morality differently. There is a semantics issue. We have different definitions of what is good and what is evil. You focus on preferences, we focus on that which is preferred. 2. Objective morality relates to the object of preference more than the subject, which is what I just said. And finally, objective morality can be grounded in the process of life, as I've just explained. Now, I hope you enjoy this. If you like content like this and you want to see more, let me know. If you have any questions about anything I've said, and I know I've said a lot, I've said more than I wanted to anyway, so there's a lot to discuss here. And Logicked, if you happen to see this, then let me know what you think, because I'm interested in your opinion. I thought, when we had a chat, this is something I forgot to mention. I contacted Logicked through Discord and we had a chat about this, and he seemed to agree with me, at least about the first part, that, we do define subjective and objective morality differently. They are two different concepts. But what we did not discuss very much is about the object of the preference. I've mentioned it briefly, but this is the detailed explanation. So if you've seen this, let me know what you think.